Hi, everybody, and welcome back to ASAP Pathway, the podcast. And I'm really, really excited. I always say I'm really excited, but I am really excited when I'm talking to people that I think are changing lives. And my guest today and she did just that with one of her posts on Facebook that went viral. Her name's Melody Yazdani Zhang. And she is a very talented photographer, but she'd probably say more importantly, she's a mom. And in 2018, one of her posts went viral on Facebook. And I just wanted to have that conversation and hopefully we educate some parents. So welcome, Melody, to the podcast. I'm so glad. I know you're busy and I know this took a while for us to get together. So I'm just so honored that you took the time to do this today. Really, truly.
Thank you for having me. Really, I'm excited to talk about this. I feel like it really is life-changing for parents, and there's just so much information that nobody gives you a manual, or even in the manual they give you, they just don't give you enough information of what to look out for. So the work you're doing is incredibly important.
Well, thank you so, so much. So I'll just get the audience caught up. And there might be people that know about your post, but I couldn't believe it was all the way back in 2018. I was looking back today. And so in 2018, I don't know how I came across your post, but you were basically posting about your son and how overwhelmed you were. Did you want to revisit? Like, what did you say in that
Yeah.
post? What was going on at that time?
So we had just gotten to a point of awareness, I think. So Keon was having all of these behavior issues in school. He couldn't keep his hands to himself. He had impulse control issues. He was having anger issues. And at home, it was even worse. Had these OCD behaviors where if there was one hair in the shower, he would have a meltdown. Um, and at the time had three girls in the house with long hair, so you can
Lots
imagine.
of hair,
I was
lots of
like the
hair.
only. Yes, but even more so, like he would wake up mad, and he would wake up. He was always an early riser. He would get up at 4:30 in the morning, sometimes completely unprompted. And of course, I was like, please, please sleep. But he would wake up mad. And like one time I remember he woke up and he was mad at his sister for something from the day before, and he started banging on her door with a hammer, and those like dents in that door were there forever. And we were like, this just wasn't normal behavior. So we had him to a therapist, and he'd been working with her for a while. She recommended psychoeducational testing because she thought that he had ADHD. But kind of in the background, he'd had a cough that hadn't gone away for 6 months. He was doing soccer, and sometimes he would just stand there coughing
Hmm.
because he couldn't like even do anything. And so we'd been seeing a pulmonologist who'd been giving him these antibiotics and just trying to kick this, and inhalers. And then they were saying, oh, you have to do these nasal sprays, and then you need to do nasal irrigation. And like it was just medication after medication after medication. Um, and his dentist made an offhand comment because his teeth were almost halfway ground down. And I was like, is that normal? I've never seen this before. And my older daughter, her teeth were very similar. And she was like, oh, he grinds his teeth. And it was just kind of offhand comment. So we were kind of marching toward this ADHD diagnosis. We were going to get him testing. And then I happened to read an article that was in the Atlantic about ADHD and sleep disordered breathing, masquerading that often we believe that they have ADHD, but actually it's some kind of sleep apnea. And they described the behavior of these children, and I was like, that's my son. So I called my insurance, and we didn't need to get a prior authorization for a sleep study. But I still took him to the ENT, and I was like, I think he has sleep apnea. And and the tricky thing with Keon is that he had never snored. Maybe I would hear a whistle every once in a while, but he fell asleep like that, head on the pillow, out. And I thought this kid just sleeps so well because he's asleep.
Exactly. Right. He sleeps so great. He
right?
hits the pillow and
Except
he's
for the early
out.
morning wake up. Yes. But then I later found out that actually he should have been taking some time to fall asleep. And the fact that he was just so sleep deprived is why he fell asleep so quickly. Um, so we did see an ENT and they made us do another round of antibiotics. So he actually developed an allergy to antibiotics while we were going through this process because they just kept loading these massive antibiotic doses, like 3 weeks on Ceftonir. And, so he actually can't take some now. And finally, we did some imaging and the ENT agreed and we did the sleep study and we found out that he was waking up some insane number of times every single minute and hour. And like his sleep latency was like that. It was less than a minute that he was asleep. And he was diagnosed with moderate sleep apnea. And the ENT then agreed that they could remove his adenoids and tonsils. But I was also learning that when they're breathing through their mouths for a prolonged period of time, which he had, that then things are not developing correctly, right? So then we did remove the adenoids and the tonsils, and he got a little bit better, and then he started to regress a little bit. And we saw a couple of practitioners, and then finally Dr. Tracy expanded his palate and opened up the airways. And I think for a lot of kids, that probably is all that they would need. But then we also found that he had a huge tongue and huge lingual tonsils. And so finally, he had another sleep study and we found out that it had improved, but it was still there. But finally, this past year, he had another procedure and finally his sleep apnea is resolved. But after
Wow.
that first surgery, he was a different kid. It was like the OCD behaviors were gone. The anger was gone. The waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning, much to my relief, was gone. And it was in all of that obsessive research that I had never learned that children shouldn't breathe through their mouth. No one, our pediatrician, the nurses, nobody had ever told me that that was disordered breathing. So, I was just flabbergasted, and that's what prompted me to write the post because I felt that we'd always gone to our well child checkups. We'd always gone to the dentist. We'd done everything that we needed to do. And I had stacks. I had stacks of parenting books. I had the baby book and what to expect and everything. And none of it said, hey, big red flag if your kid is breathing through their mouth. Big
Yes.
red flag. So that's that. I was just frustrated. That's why I wrote it.
And I was reading your post and I'm like, oh my gosh, because this is what I come across so much in my practice is exhausted, worn out parents and children. That the moms, and it's not that dads, but it's usually the moms that are coming saying, I don't know what to do. And what's interesting, Melody, probably the last person that you thought was your source of help would be a dentist. And
Yes.
and you're the first dentist you come across, right? They just kind of dismissed that bruxism, the grinding. So not even all dentists are even at a point where they're able to be educated enough to throw a life preserver to a mom and say, hey, I think I have some answers for you where we might need to research. And one of the things you said to me in our thread when we started just talking, I'm thinking to myself, okay, I know this post is viral. I don't know if she's going to even respond to me. So I took a chance and just reached out to you, and you were so quick to respond. And you said, yeah, I think I have like 3,000 friend requests in my queue right now because this resonates with so many parents.
Yes.
And you said, I'm just frustrated. I'm frustrated because why didn't the pediatrician help me figure this out? Why do we have to go so long? And I always throw up a slide when I give presentations that says, a worried mother does better research than the FBI, which is so true. And it's so true. And kudos to you because you kept going and you kept fighting for your child. And you know, we have to be an advocate for our children's health, for our own health, and really, in fairness to the pediatricians out there and the dentists, and um, it's not really taught. This is not taught in medical and dental school, really, and it should be. And hopefully that will change. I know that Stanford is starting to incorporate dental sleep medicine and their ortho residencies to educate the orthodontists. It's got to be a grassroots movement. I mean, even sleep physicians that I talk to that treat adult sleep apnea, they're just still like beyond tonsils and adenoids. They really don't know what to do for the kiddos. So that's where, you know, educating the public like you're doing, and being an advocate for other parents and other kids, it's huge. And this should be, you know, my husband used to be a school resource officer, and he would sit in the, you know, he was called to all these middle schools for behavioral disorders. And he would hear me talking all the time about kids breathing through their mouth, dark circles under their eyes, combative, oppositional, ADD, ADHD, fidgety. And he would, after about a month of being a school resource officer, he came home and he's like, oh my gosh, I think every kid that is coming into the office to see me, that these teachers like, I can't handle this. They're sleep deprived. He's like, hun, these are sleep deprived kids. So it's like, if we could just educate more teachers, more principals, that maybe we need to involve a healthcare provider regarding sleep with a lot of these behavioral things. I mean, think about it, Melody. When you and I are exhausted, we are not happy campers, you know, but we're adults, you know, and we're caffeinating ourselves. We're chemically stimulating ourselves so that to get through the day. And a kid, I mean, they just don't have those coping skills, and I mean, even adults don't have the coping skills, and we have all the health problems that go with it. But these kids, they're growing, they're developing, and at this small window, this small opportunity where the growth hormone is so important and proper sleep is so important, and it affects the whole family. Like, I'm sure, you know, other than the parents, I mean, the siblings, they're like, what's going on? You know, and sometimes they, you know, it causes problems with the relationships in the family. And it's just a lot. So you went to Dr. Tracy, you went to Tracy, you got some expansion. It seemed to definitely offset and help. And then there was still some residual. So you went back and had lingual tonsils evaluated, and then the lingual tonsils were removed. It's interesting. There's a lot of research coming out, Melody, showing that just even expanding does kind of help with shrinking some of those things down. So that's why we're seeing some changes, making room for the tongue, helping the tongue get into the roof of the mouth and out of the back of the airway, helping tonsils and adenoids to shrink a little bit. It really is collaborative. And I think the thing that's hard is, you know, parents are out there like, where do I start? Where do I go? I've done everything I'm supposed to do. We go for wellness visits and no one's giving us answers. They're just giving us medications and labels.
Yep.
And it's so frustrating. What do you, so has your pediatrician, you know, did you kind of educate the pediatrician a little bit along the way? Like, what happened? Or just get a new pediatrician? Or what?
So I did fire the pediatrician that we'd been with for a long time, but I went in for one last visit, and I actually brought a book of printed out papers of research. And I said, hey, look, this was right in front of our faces the whole time. And I feel like you should have been able to recognize it. I feel like just even looking at his teeth that were half ground down should have been a big red flag. Like, obviously the pediatrician isn't looking at him at night and seeing the way he's breathing, but he does have the opportunity to recognize some of these things. And I gave him the paperwork, and then we transferred care to a different practice. And so when he came into the new practice, he had already been diagnosed with sleep apnea. It was something I already knew, so I didn't have to advocate as much. And we've gotten such a wonderful referral for an ENT that, we switched practice to Dr. Black, and we've been very, very happy with her. Um, no, but it's really interesting what you're saying about like these children with the behavioral issues. That we have a family member that's estranged that grew up in the 70s, and I was told that they took him to all of the different resources, psychiatrists, and one of them said some people just have a criminal mind.
Hmm.
And when you look at pictures of him, he has a long face. He has that face of somebody who probably grew up with sleep disorder breathing. So it's like this, even if you lay all of the school shooters out on a board, the vast majority of them have hollow eyes and long faces. And it's like, this is not just something that's impacting families, but it's impacting communities.
Yes.
And I know the needle's moving. I know it is. Like the book Jaws came out, Breath by James Nestor came out. Those are
Yes. Yes.
fantastic books. But it does need to be part of the education. I mean, we're not fully educating our practitioners if this is something they're entirely unaware of, or they're completely blind to how airways impact the rest of the body. The body doesn't like the airway is not one piece that just exists by
Right.
itself, right?
Right. I mean, you've got a face that's right in front of the airway.
Yes.
So it's really interesting, Melody, because I just had an interview with an ENT last week, and then a few weeks before that, some orthodontists that are very progressive and airway aware. And I asked them, what do you feel is the problem? What do you feel is what's the holdup? Why aren't we, we're shouting this from the mountaintops. We see children getting better. Why isn't this just worldwide taking off? Like, oh my goodness. And the feedback I get is a few things. One, it's not taught in the school system. So it's a big paradigm shift for healthcare providers that are so used to a certain model, and they're, especially the pediatricians. I mean, they're very overwhelmed with the current state of how they have to just medical records, and they're so overwhelmed with corporate aspects of how they're being pretty much ran by corporate entities right now. And you're seeing less patient care. They don't have the time sometimes to sit with their patients like they want to. But even then, the education isn't there, and they have to really step out of their paradigm and continue to learn beyond medical school and beyond dental school. But even with some practitioners, when they're exposed to this, there really just are some that aren't convinced it helps. Some practitioners are, they think it's this is just the latest bandwagon people are on, and, everything's airway. And I mean, the things I've heard are just shocking to me, because it's, Melody, I mean, I don't think you have a doctorate in anything. Maybe you do, but it's pretty common sense. And when I sit with a parent like you and I show them a CBCT and I show them like the adenoids and how it's like a speed bump blocking the airflow, and your child has now no choice but to breathe through their mouth. And mouth breathing causes craniofacial developmental problems. The tongue should be in the roof of the mouth. We should be nose breathing. Nose breathing is how we were designed. The nose just isn't a decoration on your face. It's supposed to be used. So when you have nasal disuse, there's consequences that happen in the body because we're not using it the way it was designed. Parents are like, oh, yeah, makes sense. Yeah. And you're so right. It's so funny that you bring up when you look at on the news, when you look at somebody that is, their mugshot or their most recent picture, or what neighbors would say or parents would say about, they just weren't stable, or and they have that hollow look in their eyes, like you said, and you can see, mid-face deficiencies and just poor craniofacial development. A lot of them are sleep deprived. Even when they look
Yeah.
at their medical records, they were not sleeping properly. It's like, sound the alarms. Like,
Yeah.
our communities really are, it's not just their families, but like you said, the communities are compromised too. When we have unhealthy individuals walking around among us, that can just get some help. And it's so sad. Like, you have the family member that's been ostracized, that had probably a lot of behavioral and relational issues. And who knows,
Yeah. They could have lived a different life, probably.
they could have
Yeah.
lived a
And
different life.
I think of what Keon's future probably would have been if if I hadn't happened to read the right thing at the right time. Um, and it's just so frustrating because it was, I feel like we were this close to living that reality.
Yeah.
And there are lots of parents who are living that reality, who's even they have an infant that's breathing through their mouths and nobody has said to them, oh, wait,
Oop, that's
can we fix that?
yeah, yeah, exactly. I see it too. I mean, once you see it, you can't unsee it. And you see it
Mhm.
honestly everywhere. My kids are, I mean, they've been hearing me talk about, breathing through your nose, not your mouth, tongue in the roof of your mouth. How do you swallow? And they would come home from school, Mom, you wouldn't believe all the kids in my class that don't breathe right. And, I can hear them breathing behind me in class. And my son, who's now a junior in college, he has a friend, and he would say, Mom, he's the one, the mouth breather. He would say that, the mouth breather. I'm like, oh my gosh, what have I done? But, he said, Mom, he doesn't pay attention. He doesn't listen when you talk to him. It's like you have to repeat yourself. So they get it. And the older they've gotten, and,
Mhm.
and they say things and try to kindly, I say, please kindly, maybe bring things to their attention. Like, hey, have you gone to the doctor about, maybe seeing an allergist or something? But what is it like for you as a mom in the community with other parents? When you first started talking about this, did you ever get pushback from other parents, or what was the reaction from family members and parents? Like, what did you go through?
Um, so family members, I was pretty vocal with everything. And they were like, "Oh, yeah, Melody's on to this topic and she's just going to do a bunch of research and whatever." If you look at the post, I think you can see the edit history. And it's really funny because I posted our experience and what I had found. I didn't post any of the research that I had read or any of the articles. And so the first really interesting thing was I got a lot of responses that were like, "Oh, look at this stay-at-home mom on her soapbox." And I was like,
Oh my
okay.
gosh.
So I went back and I put all of that. I was like, well, you can just read all of this for yourself. And this is before like Breath and Jaws were out. And now I probably would just be like, oh, go read these books. They're so well researched, right? Um, but it's fascinating and it's impossible to read all of the comments because there are so many of them. But it was a lot of, wait, this is my kid. This is my kid. Oh, wait, that's me. This is my kid. That's me. Hey, mom, doesn't that sound like me? Doesn't that sound like my kid? Or people tagging their significant other. Now I just went back to it a couple of months ago to read the comments, and there are people that have come back to it years later.
Hmm.
It is so impactful that it changed their life. There are people that had sleep apnea that just had no idea that it was like the frog. You put them in a pot of water and you turn up the heat and it doesn't ever jump out. That's the way that they were living.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until they read that they were like, people don't live this way. This isn't the way we're supposed to exist. Wait a minute. Or people whose children's lives have been changed because they read that article. So it's like the power of one person's story, but could we just put it like in all of the people that see all of these young babies and get them in
Yeah.
the beginning so you don't have to go through it and you don't have to have this major life change, that you just grow up healthy, But it's tens of thousands of people, I think, maybe more, whose
Yes,
lives have been
Melody.
changed by this.
Yes. And I mean, I'm seeing that this is emotional for you. This is,
Yeah.
and I have had my own experience with losing my dad to sleep apnea and all the comorbidities that go along with it. And man, I mean, that's how I got pulled into this, was my own family. And I think a lot of us, your story was my kid's story. I have all of my kids had some form of sleep disordered breathing that no one identified. Nobody identified. And I was the one that was like, something's off, something's not right. But when you watch a loved one struggle, and you will do everything in your power.
Yeah.
And you don't stop. You just keep fighting for them the best you can. And so that is so interesting that going back, there are people years later that have returned to the post and said it changed their life. I mean, you are such a warrior for your family, and you have changed a lot of lives. And it's exponential, Melody, because not only did you change their lives, I guarantee you they're going on to change others' lives too, because of what they heard from you and what they watched, what you experienced, and helping your son. And you said he's doing really good now. So what are the differences that you've seen in your family dynamics and for him?
He's becoming an adult. I mean, he's 13
How old?
now.
Yeah, I was going to say, how old is he now?
Yeah.
Oh, that's crazy.
He's 13, so he must have been, 6 or 7, I guess, when
Yeah.
I wrote that. And he's growing like a weed. He eats so much. He really, because of his journey, he really prioritizes sleep, and he knows, like, he's very conscious of if he's tired, if he didn't get a good night's sleep. Yeah, but the kid is smart. He's whip smart, maybe too smart for his own good. But he has developed, I think when I had this kid who had so little impulse control and he seemed out of control, so much of that, as a mom, you're like, is this because of the way I parented, right? Is it I was too lax with him, or maybe I did something wrong? And to find out that no, that he just really was suffering. To know that I could help him in that journey. And it's been a long journey. I mean, It was not overnight, right? It was many procedures, and then waiting, and expansion takes forever. But he progressively got better and better. And that kid with the OCD behaviors disappeared after the first procedure. Like that, we never saw it again. We saw some more tantrums, and he would backslide every once in a while, but like, having the perspective of somebody who lived with a child that is really struggling, and now to have a kid that is thriving, that is such a blessing. Like that is so wonderful to be in this place, especially to know that he could have had a different path. So yeah, I'm grateful, and he's thriving. He's doing really well.
I love hearing that. Does he remember feeling different does he remember feeling less than optimal, or does he remember how he felt or is it just
I think because of the sleep apnea, he actually doesn't have a lot of memories of the years before. And I don't know if that's like a short-term to long-term memory thing that was affected when he wasn't sleeping as well as he should have, or what, but he really only can remember the past couple of years and not as much from the previous years. So he's not really aware of the change. He only knows like all the procedures that he had to go through.
He remembers the procedures. Yeah, I'm sure he does.
Remembers the procedures.
Yeah. I'm sure he does. And what you said was important too, that this was not, this was a lot of collaboration. It can be complex, and there's different aspects. There's, anatomy and non-anatomical aspects. There's sleep hygiene, but for sure, we have to have that airway as patent as possible to breathe. The brain needs it. So I'm just so happy to hear that Kian's doing better and he's thriving and he's becoming a young man now. And now you've got you got puberty on your hands now.
Yeah,
That's a whole other podcast, Melody.
Well, I have two older daughters, so we've been through some of this.
Yes.
And I think it's a different ball game for the boys. It's
It
easier though.
is. It is a little different. I have boys and girls too, and it is a little different. But I tell you what, I mean, going through all these changes, they need to be their best selves, and you removed a lot of obstacles out of his way. And you know, I hope there is a parent or a practitioner that hears this and says, I saw somebody this week in my life that maybe I need to share this with. There's some kid right now, Melody, that, they're struggling and nobody knows what to do for them. And they're kind of lost on their journey. So hopefully someone can step on that path with them and extend a hand and say, hey, over here, I think I have something that's going to help you thrive, help you live your best life and be your best self. I'm actually going to put, I'll mention those two books, Jaws and Breathe. Those are great books. There's some other books I can put links in there too, that can hopefully help some practitioners and families. But I really think it's people like you, Melody. It's the parents demanding the care that they deserve and their child deserves. That's going to hopefully push this forward. It's trickling through the academics, right? But it's slow. But I think the more parents that walk into that exam room and really force that practitioner, whether it's the dentist, the pediatric dentist, their heads down, they're busy, and just say, look, I have some things I want to talk about with you, and I need your help. That I think we just need to have more conversations like that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Melody. I appreciate you being here today. I know you're a busy mama, you're a busy professional. And I always like to end the podcast because I love to take people back to their own childhood a little bit. So I just had 3 quick questions. Okay. So first, are you a chocolate or vanilla girl? Do you like chocolate or vanilla better?
Oh, chocolate all the way.
You're a chocolate girl. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
And what was your favorite cereal when you were a kid?
Oh, you know what? That's a hard one because we weren't allowed to have sugar. So
Good
we had
for
Cheerios.
You.
That's
you had
all
Cheerios.
We were allowed to have.
So it's like, did I like Cheerios or I just was kind of forced to have Cheerios?
Well, when I could buy my own cereal, it was Lucky Charms, but my mom very smartly would never have purchased that for us. So yeah. Yeah.
I love it. I love it. And then what was your favorite toys? Like one of your favorite toys when you were a kid that you can remember, like was your favorite?
Oh gosh. That's so funny. I don't think I remember any toys. We were a play outside with sticks.
That is good for you. Yeah. I just had a podcast with someone last week and he said, we didn't have toys. I said, so what was it like? You had a stick in a can and you go outside? And he said, yeah, pretty much.
Yeah,
that's what we did.
The creek and played like fairies or played like
I love it.
Wonderland, So there were toys, but like they were clutter. They were just like we were outside we were definitely the kick them outside, don't come home till dinner. Right.
Same. Yeah. My mom, we had when the street lights came on, that's when we were expected to be back home, which is so crazy. That would never happen today. But I do think, childhood, gosh, it's so precious. It just forms who we are. And it sounds like you had a really creative, fun childhood. And I wish more kids would get outside and get that vitamin D. And hopefully we're going to have some changes and see healthier kids in the future. So, well, thank you, Melody, for being on. We just appreciate you so much.
Well, thank you for having me.
And keep on being a warrior.
I love talking about this. Yeah, absolutely.
Keep us posted and I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Take care.
Bye. Thanks. Bye.